Neil Roberts and Kathleen Jones, who are here too on the public education side. We'll move on now to apologies. Apologies from Councillor Bob Murray and also from the Chief Executive, Judith Greenall. She's got an important meeting this morning regarding COVID. Alan Smith is here on her behalf. Those are all the apologies I've had. Thank you, Ria. Chair, could I add Geraint Davis, who isn't here today because his father is unwell. So he's away this week. Yes, I had that information. I wasn't sure whether it was to be made public, but thank you, Hugh. And we're thinking of Geraint and his father during this difficult time. It isn't a COVID, but another problem. But thank you, Hugh. Declarations. I've got a declaration of interest as I'm a governor at Ysgol y Castell.
Yeah. And Ysgol Tim over.
Diolch, Ellie. Diolch.
Chair, I need to declare two interests. One, I'm a governor at Ysgol Llys and Prestatyn, but two, I'm not sure what item it is, but my children use Welsh language. We use transport to Welsh language schools. So that's item 5 or 6, is it?
Diolch yn fawr. Mae Meirig yn siarad ar draws pawb.
Meirig is cutting across at the moment. We can hear him calling numbers out.
Can I just interrupt and say Governor Prestatyn High School, please?
Anyone else? Neil Roberts?
Governor of the Ysgol Park in Denby.
Diolch yn fawr. Peter?
Governor at VP School St Asaph.
Diolch, Peter. No ni, diolch yn fawr.
No. Like item 5 and 6, I'm a parent and a governor. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you. Matters at all, to my knowledge. Diolch yn fawr. Felly, minutes of the last meeting, minutes of the Performance Scrutiny Committee held on 1st October 2020 were submitted. Felly, ewn ni drwyddo nhw.
So we'll go through the minutes, if I can find them.
Correction first, please, if you were willing to look through them. Number 5, COVID-19 recovery theme was the main thing we discussed. Dan ni'n mynd mlaen wan i dudalen 9.
We're moving now to page 9.
Scrutiny work programme and feedback committee representative.
Can anybody propose that the minutes are correct, please? Thank you, Peter. I will second that. So are you all happy that they're a true reflection? Thank you. I've just had a message from Nicola. She is here instead of Geraint this morning. Thank you. Yes, Meirig. I am a governor of Ysgol Cymeriadog. I want to express declare an interest. Have I joined the meeting? Yes, we've begun the meeting. I can hear you clearly. I can see you, but just for you to know, I've arrived at the meeting, but I haven't got a video. Thank you, David. I want to express an interest because I'm a governor of Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd and Ysgol Borthyn. Thank you for explaining that. So we've agreed that the minutes are correct. The meeting on the 1st of October. We'll go through them now for any matters arising. We'll now move on to the next meeting that we had just before Christmas. This was on the 22nd of December. And you will see there that Emrys Wyn presented the problem with plastics. Is anybody willing to propose that the minutes are correct? Thank you, Ellie. And I will second that. Are there any matters arising from these minutes, please? No, I don't think so. I can see you clearly now, David.
Just one comment, Chair. Did it really only take half an hour?
Pardon?
Did it really only take half an hour?
Yes, it was a very, very quick meeting. Very quick meeting. It won't be like this today.
Oh, I hoped.
Emrys Wyn, yeah.
Just very briefly, could I just say briefly that we are looking forward to develop an arrangement where we can mentor or monitor, I should say, the arrangements with regards to the use of plastic in the county over the next few months anyway. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item. I'm going to move over now to Hilditch Roberts, who is in charge of Welsh and education throughout the county, and also Nicholas Stubbins, who is here on behalf of Geraint Davis. And you can present the GWE officials, Nicola and Hugh, if you don't mind. So over to you, Hugh. Thank you. Good morning, all.
Normally, this is the time of year where we come and we present the GCSE and A-level results and what's happened the year before, and you give us a good old grilling on each performance of each school and high school and how we're doing. Unfortunately, in these strange, unique times, this is not the case. So what we bring before you really is a summary, really, that of all the efforts that have been made to support learners to achieve their full potential during these really strange times, and trying to give you a flavour of how education and schools, especially, and children and parents have had to adapt to try and deliver the educational curriculum. So really, what I'm going to just canter through it, because obviously I know there's so much to read, but no doubt you've all read it. So basically what I want to just try and convey is that, you know, in these, and I would say if you ask any teacher, if you ask any educational officer, it is probably the most challenging times of their career. And that's why we've got Maya and Jackie from GWE here to support Nicola and myself, because no doubt there will be questions thrown up that we probably can't answer. But in a quick canter, staff in local authorities and GWE have had to really change the pattern and the way they work to provide an efficient service that supports the school community going forward during the pandemic. We've worked really close as 6 regions to ensure that we deliver a whole offer across the piece. And it has really refocused several times owing to, you know, the changes that have been made. And, you know, I might well touch on it as well. When we're sitting here today, it's not just the changes that happen to the curriculum, it's the changes to transport, it's the changes to risk assessment, it's the changes to health and safety, it's the changes to catering, changes to cleaning. It's not just the educational delivery that's been shaken, if you like, it's actually the whole building school offer. We've supported senior leaders through the well-being and provided a series of workshops. And one of the major things we've done in Denbighshire is that Geraint has introduced a weekly video call, if you like, or a Zoom call for all heads, which has been really positive in sharing of information and updates, because as you all know, what tends to happen along this journey is that Welsh Government make an announcement, ask schools to do X, Y, and Z, and then 3 weeks later send the guidance. But it's already been implemented. So we're really playing catch up in a lot of all this. So we found that Geraint's weekly meetings or briefings have really made a difference to the schools. So we've been really careful that we're supporting the senior leaders. And as I said, we worked across North Wales with GWE, and the regional approach has made a difference because we've had consistency right across. And I've also been involved in a lot of all North Wales heads meetings, which we see that coming through, which is very positive. The main areas we've looked, the requirements have been around health and safety, site and facility manager, transport, staffing arrangement, blended teaching and learning, massive challenge to deliver that, because it can be delivered differently from each school, depending on how that teacher, to give you an example, you can have a primary school of 250 children with many teachers in that school, and therefore they're able to adapt to each year to be able to do a certain type of blended learning. But then you may have, 2 teachers in a school, and therefore they have to adapt to deliver it for the whole school. So you're not going to get the same blended learning in every school, but you are going to get, they are delivering it. And interestingly, inclusion and pupil support has been a massive thing for Denbighshire, where we've seen, the last figures I saw was that actually our referrals for children in Denbighshire are lower during COVID than that before. Because what we've seen is that our teachers are in touch on a regular basis, especially the vulnerable children, which have been contacted and kept in touch. We've sorted the free school meals out. So we're closer to our children in a challenging time, which we thought we would have been the other way around, if that makes sense. So that's a real positive. So everything we have done is actually quite bespoke, because obviously, as I just alluded to, that the different schools will have different things. We've also made sure that the schools that we had on our schools causing concern list prior to COVID still had access to clear and targeted support to help them through a difficult period. And a lot of time and energy has been put into place to contact international experts and to research international practice to learn and establish the principles of effective distance and blended learning. So it's just not, we've done training, we've supported staff. We haven't just said, off you go, teachers, do some blended learning. We've given them the guidance and the support that they need to make sure that we deliver this. And obviously, not only are the schools delivering it, but GWE are also evaluating what is being delivered, which is really important. So we've got almost an independent view of what we have. I mean, let's be honest, the school leaders and the heads will acknowledge this is the greatest challenge, to deliver blended learning at distance. We've got, I declared an interest, my son, he's got his lesson calls and he gets up in time, and it's quite impressive really to think, but this is happening, and they are delivering. And I'm speaking as a parent, I've had a report back from the school on his progress, so I still know that he is actually accessing and delivering his education. And having said that, we thought that maybe the parental engagement would have been more of a challenge, but it's been a key factor in securing effective distance blended learning. And maybe that is because parents are home more and they've taken that burden on, that the school, that homeschooling is really important, and they've also probably taken a few glasses of wine along the way to help them get through it. But it is being delivered. So I think we need to acknowledge the parents are on this. So in essence, we don't know what the future holds. And in my mind, I was thinking, potentially it could be 2023, whoever the next lead member of education is, the next administration, before they can come back to this committee and deliver you exam results. Because we don't know what that future is. We know that the teacher assessments will be done. We will be working already to find out and lobby what happens next year. And again, I don't mean to use my son as an example, but he's in year 10, so he'll be in year 11 next year. So what is his GCSE looking like? What will it be? So we could be a long way off, you know, coming back to deliver to you what we normally deliver. And that's just a sign of the challenging times. So, you know, all we can do is prioritize additional support for secondary schools in particular in preparation for the exam grades in 2021. That is a priority for us. We will continue to support schools with the cluster and the provision to meet any future lockdown scenarios, which who knows what happens. Any resources we can identify, we will support, and an improvement advisor from GWE will support from the centre as well. And continually and daily identify, share best practice from blended learning, any resources we're sharing. And, you know, a question I have a lot is, well, have all the children got IT? As far as we are concerned, yes, they have, because if they contact the authority, we will support them. And really, really, really big thing for you counsellors when you're out there in the mix and people asking you questions is, if they got an Xbox or a PlayStation, they can access the Google apps, etc. They only need a keyboard to support that. So I think it's really important that you're aware of that out there. So you know, but having said that, the authority are aware that there's no iPad or laptop. We will support them through that. Everybody who's asked for one, we've helped. So just for you to know. I think that's about it in a nutshell. Unless Nicola or Mair or Jackie want to come in. But it's just really just an overview of what life is like back in schools, and how we are supporting them. But what I want to say is, from the bottom of my heart, the attitude and engagement of head teachers and staff in schools and education during this period, I would challenge. There's no better in Wales. I mean, you will have seen me come out before Christmas saying that I wanted children to remain in school because I was supported that. In fact, before Christmas, if our children after Christmas, if our children had gone back, I think it was something like 98% of our children would have been in education on the first week of January going back. But our teachers have said simply, children come first, tell us what we need to do and we'll do it. And that has never, ever been a pushback from us here in Denbighshire. And I know other areas have had a lot of pushbacks, but I want to say a personal thank you to the school, to the staff, the heads, the cooks, the cleaners, everybody for what they're giving us here in Denbighshire, because our children are truly privileged to have that ethos. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you. Does anybody else, like Nicola or James Brown, do you want to say a word? Any members of GWE before we move on to members of the committee to ask questions?
Hi, Errol. Sorry, Myra
So it's Mair here from GWE. Good morning. How are you all? Thank you for the invitation to be here. If it's all right with you, I would like to give Jackie and I would like to give you a short presentation.
I'm just going to hand over to Jackie. Jackie's going to begin, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay, Jackie.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Hugh has already taken a lot of our presentation for you and articulated it very, very well. But we'd just like to kind of just to reiterate a lot of what Hugh has said, and just to talk through some of the documentation that's been presented with you. Prior to the meeting, you've been presented with a collection of documents, and we were going to summarise them as best we could during this session and respond to any questions that you may have that come from those documents. So you were given a performance scrutiny, which was a timed work that was undertaken so far, which was Appendix 2, and a report detailing the professional learning, which is like a pictorial representation of all the information that's been given to schools, which we've put together to support schools since the beginning in March. There was also a document which explains the resources which have been available to support schools as part of the accelerated skills provision. And then there's also the current offer of professional learning available to schools, which is Appendix 5.
So what we're hoping to do in this presentation, and we promise to be really brief, but we're just going to touch upon 3 aspects of the work that's been going on. So firstly, we're going to just talk a little bit about what our work programme has been and continues to be over the different phases of the COVID-19 period. Secondly, we'd like to discuss how schools have adapted to the new ways of working in response to the restrictions that have been placed upon them. And lastly, we want to just consider with you the impact of COVID on future educational delivery practices. So we all know that the pace of change at the moment is significant, and papers that we have put together for you just at the beginning of this term might now even start to appear to be out of date, especially as they refer to current work programmes which change incredibly quickly to be reactive. And this is reflective completely of how we as a service continue to adapt and be flexible to respond to the situations.
Okay, so if we start from during the period since March 2020 and through to this present time, 6 local authorities, as Hugh said, across the north have worked collaboratively with GWER, supporting each other in various work streams. So we can provide consistency in message and a regional approach to all aspects of our work. Our close partnership, so GWER's partnership with the Denbighshire local authority officers has been vital in support that we've been able to give, and we are continuing to give to schools at this time. So GWER and the local authority officers in Denbighshire have had to adapt their work in order to continue to provide effective services and support for all the schools and all their communities during the pandemic. And during this difficult period, we in GWER we tried to keep true to our vision and values as an organisation, that it continually learning.
So as a service, GWER have had to refocus several times during this period to meet the needs of the range of stakeholders. The ability to be flexible and agile and to work effectively together in different teams, increasingly across sector, has had a significant impact on our organisational behaviour and external perceptions. At the heart of the refocusing has been the need to ensure the well-being of school leaders, the staff in schools and the learners and the parents, which has been paramount to any decision making that has taken place. And we've applied this to ensuring the right level of support, both operational and professional, has been directed accurately by us as a service. Regular contact with school leaders has been an important and large part of our work, and has been and continues to be well received. Head teachers feeling that they can turn to a professional colleague to share challenging issues and find solutions to address day-to-day issues has, I think, been invaluable.
So I'm not going to ask you to look at the documents now, because I'm sure that you've already had a browse through them, but in Appendix 1 of the documents that we shared with you, the first 3 phases indicate the work that we did with the Denbighshire schools during the first lockdown period from March. And this was very much and continues to be focused on the health and the well-being of staff and the pupils, supporting the schools to provide the hubs and to stay open for pupils of critical workers, whilst also supporting them with their distance learning for the pupils who are having to work from home. This also included very regular contact with the head teachers to ensure that they had the appropriate support to operate effectively, but also to act as a sounding board, to support their own well-being. Schools were also provided with a suite of resources, websites, reference points for all age groups that could be accessed quickly. They were given models of how distance learning could look, and these models were actually shared nationally as well when they were seen by Welsh Government. Guidance and support was given to schools regarding feedback to learners and training packages for schools on digital means to communication and to teach children. So these were provided and available to all schools. GWER school improvement advisors met with clusters of schools, individual schools and head teachers on a very regular basis to share updates, and to provide opportunities to discuss lessons that have been learnt during that period.
Sorry, my computer was just trying to restart there, excuse me. So from June 29th onwards, when all pupils returned to school, we moved into what is termed phase 4 in the appendix document that you have. As well as working alongside Karen Evans and Geraint Davis and the whole team to ensure that risk assessments were in place, we continued to support schools through maintaining regular contact to support staff and learner wellbeing initially. We developed and published extensive guidance and models for blended learning approaches, and we had a single curriculum mindset informing all of this work, involving advice and guidance for face-to-face and distance learning. And around that, we provided a huge degree of professional learning in order to upskill teachers in this way of working. The local authority and GWER together have also worked on issues that needed to be addressed around fitness of learners for learning in preparation for their full integration back into schools as planned for in September.
So phases 5 and 7 of Appendix 1 details the next phase of our work, which was from September 2020 onwards. GWER's approach was that schools are prepared to ensure learning for all pupils, initially needed to focus on 3 interrelated components that would assess pupils' fitness for learning by first looking at their emotional and well-being, their emotional and mental well-being, by looking at their health and their physical fitness, and then looking at the core skills of numeracy, literacy, learning to lead, learning to learn, and independence skills. So depending on those assessment outcomes, 3 levels of support were offered to schools. So first of all, there was a universal offer, which had been available for all learners. Secondly, there was targeted support for those who've been identified as needing some initial support in any of those 3 areas. And then finally, the specialist or acute support that any identified pupils may need.
So just to touch on GWER's work programme in the autumn term. So we use the phrase returning to the new normal an awful lot at the beginning of September. And we as a service, along with the LEA, had planned for what we had predicted would be happening. But as with all best laid plans, especially at the moment, our plans then had to be adapted again very significantly and very quickly. The first 2 items that you will see in your documentation detailing the work programmes are around regular contact with all head teachers and senior leadership teams. And we're discussing reflections and lessons learned from lockdown periods and scenario planning. These began as scheduled in September, and such meetings are ongoing in all manner of ways. However, with the immense pressure that schools and head teachers are under at the moment, the majority of the work programme is now in response to national requirements and schools' needs. And it can't be stressed enough just how much pressure schools are under to be continuously reactive and adaptive. So as well as being preoccupied by operational matters, head teachers are trying to get through each day by keeping everybody safe, responding to health and safety requirements, dealing with parental inquiries, keeping their schools open for pupils of critical workers and vulnerable children, while simultaneously ensuring that there is a continuation of progressive learning for all their pupils. That they really are, as Hugh has already said, doing an amazing job that really does need to be recognised. Because of the ongoing and ever-changing situation, our work has had to shift considerably to support head teachers and school staff in preparing for whichever scenario they might find themselves in. And in terms of scenarios, these have been and could be anything from the school being open to all staff working in school, all pupils in school, through to the school being closed to all, where all staff are working from home, perhaps some unable to work, and all learners accessing distance learning, and of course all the very various scenarios in between. The meetings with schools are ongoing in raising awareness of the new forward working plan, and during these meetings schools are familiarising themselves with support centre that GWER has established. The feedback from Denbighshire schools, I have to say, is continually extremely positive about this support.
So in terms of support, a new Google Classroom has been created. This classroom can be used as a short-term emergency resource, but also as an example of how digital blended learning model could look as we move forward towards the new curriculum. So it's supporting them in moving forward as well. And it's very different to previous resources that we provided, as it's a model which a teacher can adapt using their old classroom based on blended learning rather than distance learning. And to support this learning, the 6 directors have sent a letter to all schools, letter signed by the managing director of GWER as well, requesting that all schools support each other by sharing resources. And we've developed a place for them to share these resources, that teachers will be able to respond to different operational scenarios that they would find themselves in, as Maya's just mentioned. Clusters and alliances of schools are in the process of sharing resources, approaches, and other forms of support. And it involves kind of looking at what they've already presented and already created, identifying any gaps and co-creating these additional resources to respond to these gaps. We've got a support centre where the teachers can go to find any of these resources they would find useful for them to help them in the scenarios that they're finding themselves in. And all schools have been given some funding to help them support them to get this support centre up and running as quickly as possible for all to use.
So I'm just going to touch very briefly on the content of the GWER professional learning offer, which you have been sent already as Appendix 5. This year, of course, this is considerably reduced, but it covers the 5 key areas that schools need support for in response to various scenarios at the moment. So it includes the reform journey, developing the workforce, and this includes leadership at all levels, support for newly qualified teachers and for teaching assistants, support and training around digital capability, and the accelerating learning programme. All other aspects of a school's usual work programme, such as discussion around school development planning, performance management, and a school's self-evaluation processes and cycle, are only taking place at a time when the school is in the right place to do these things, and are dependent on the situation and scenarios that they find themselves in. The focus at the moment continues to be keeping everyone safe, keeping schools open for those children who need to access the school, and ensuring that there is a true continuity of learning for all the learners. So as Jackie mentioned, we are also working with schools to ensure that the Accelerating Learning Grant is being used effectively. We've developed a series of resources and training opportunities that are available to all schools, and they will support them in those various areas that pupils need accelerated pace of learning. We've also worked closely with Bangor University to design strategies and support materials to be used in schools and at home with the support of parents. Our officers are liaising with schools regarding the Accelerated Learning Grants continuously and are signing off the plans once the schools have planned appropriate use of the grant.
Okay, so part of the initial question was how are schools responding to COVID? So a few bullet points, and they are continuing with in-school provision for pupils of critical workers and vulnerable pupils. They're providing both distance and blended learning to pupils. They're developing cluster work, sharing resources and approaches. They're involved in sharing best practice from one school to another, i.e. engaging with reluctant learners and families. They're looking at digital platforms and different communication systems. They're strengthening their use of IT. It's been a very, very steep learning curve for a lot of teachers in developing their use of IT so that they can still provide quality provision for pupils and to enable them to effectively communicate between themselves and within schools and with stakeholders. There is been an intensive programme of upskilling staff, which where officers have provided when needed through the use of digital platforms for professional development, and they're still maintaining their own professional learning. There is a program of professional learning that's started this week for senior leaders and for senior leaders and head teachers, moving towards the new curriculum on change management and shared vision. So they are maintaining that, looking towards progress towards the implementation of the ALM reform and the new curriculum.
So finally from us, we need to now just respond to the request that you made for us to consider the impact of the disruptive COVID period on future educational delivery practice. And this falls into a couple of different areas really. In the short term, the impact of the rest of this academic year is likely to continue to be significant. And as a service, we will continue to proactively support schools' needs in a generic way with our general programme, but in a bespoke way by responding to every school's needs individually. We can only expect that learners are likely to be further affected by a continued lockdown, and I believe we're having an update tomorrow from the government about this. If distance learning therefore continues, as we expect it will have to, we will continue to work with schools to support their provision and to advise on how they can best accelerate learning. We'll continue to support and encourage cluster work and the sharing and collaborative work within the secondary sector we're calling alliance work. But we will ensure that learner and staff wellbeing needs are continuously a focus too. In terms of schools with learners in years 11, 12 and 13, obviously this is again a crucial time. We'll work with schools still to guide and to advise them with the centre determined grades, as the government are calling the outcomes that they wish to receive this year, which will replace the terminal exams. We're expecting a good deal more information regarding how they will work to come out over the next fortnight. And we will continue to guide and shape with schools how these centre-determined grades are agreed, how they're moderated and verified. A vital consideration at the moment is the time scale around the information and around the grades. This is certainly going to be an all-absorbing agenda for secondary and through schools and school heads as we move forward. In terms of likely impacts that the pandemic will have on future learning practices, well, we talk about the new normal, and it's the case that there are many positives that have emerged from this period of time that will be built on in moving forward. So I could quote here things such as teachers improving their range of technological skills to enable effective digital learning, pupils' digital skills as well being improved, and also, in the very best instances, their independent learning skills. Homework is going to, I think, be completely reimagined because of the blended learning practices that have been used over these last few months. So much so that I think we're unlikely to see schools go back at all to the previous ways in which homework was organised. We've also seen a need for teachers to become increasingly more collaborative, and teachers, we are collaborative beasts at the best of times, but teachers have had to be extremely creative regarding planning, teaching, feedback, and they're even better placed now for accelerated learning and learning at pace because of that. So we have the curriculum for Wales being introduced for the next couple of years. We're moving into a purpose-driven curriculum, as you know, but the way of working that we've been forced into over the COVID period will certainly be helpful with planning and implementing the new curriculum. Almost lastly, arguably during this period, wellbeing has become an even sharper focus for schools, and this agenda will certainly continue. So lastly, I think in terms of impact on future education practices, this period has necessarily provoked intense conversations around how qualifications are accredited, looking at not having that one big assessment at the end of a course, but rather incidental assessments from the school, more controlled by the school, And this is certainly going to accelerate the national discussion about how key outcomes are secured for our examination year groups. So just by finishing now, the positive comments that I'm making there about the impact on future educations are not intended to negate or ignore the potentially serious effects of this period of time. But the comments that I make there seek to show that we do have a forward-looking mindset, and that the resilience and the solutions-focused attitude that has been evident within the workforce of Denbighshire will certainly inspire the way ahead. So that's the end of the presentation from us. I'm so sorry if we've taken too much time.
I just would like to add one thing. Sorry, very, very sorry. If you would like to just take the opportunity in your own time to have a look through Appendix 2, it's a visual explanation of what's been available to schools through a digital process. There's an awful lot of work there, and I think visually it will show you what we have provided to schools. But also at this point, I would like to offer, if you would like to take up the offer at a later date, if you would like a more detailed explanation of those different aspects of the work. So thank you.
Thank you both. That was very thorough. And you also deserve special thanks for the work that you do in the background to support schools. Before we move on to questions, Councillor Hugh Hilditch-Roberts wants to come back to us. Thank you.
Everything we just heard from Mile and Jackie and what I said before has actually been externally assessed by Estin. You know, we were taking over the calls by Estin before Christmas. We have had a positive, it's not like a normal inspection, but a positive letter back. And also Denbighshire is in the top 10 authorities in Wales for best practice. And I think that really is a real feather in the education and the schools team cap, and also other service who are supported as well across the council, transport, health and safety, catering, etc. And you know that I think I wrote to the leader and the chief exec and said, if that inspection or assessment from Estin had been negative, that would have had real massive repercussions for the council. So that really is an achievement in itself by the team. So again, just I wanted to share. I don't know why I forgot to tell you that. Sorry, but I just wanted to share that with you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn I Hugh.
You can ask the question when I tell you. Yes, you can. Ask, your name is down to ask a question later on. Thank you, David. And thank you, Hugh, for that. That's one question I was going to ask. What is Estin's contribution towards keeping an eye on every county? So obviously I won't need that to ask that question. I'm now going to the member who represents Upper Denby, Geraint Williams, to ask a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Cadeirydd. Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd just like to echo what Hugh said in his initial conversation, and in regards to thanking everybody from the school cleaner right the way up to the ministers, basically, for the support that they've given, and also for pupils to engage. It's obviously not been an easy time for them to engage as well. And I'd like to thank everybody. Maeve did touch on my question, and it was basically, did they see things, unfortunately, because of the way things have developed this last 12 months, could they see things not going back to normal in the future? And Maeve did touch on it, so it was more or less covered in it. But yeah, thank you very much for that. And it was good to see that some positives may come out of this last 12 months. So thank you, Chair.
I agree entirely with you, Geraint. Now, David Williams, this is your opportunity, who represents Dyserth.
You're on mute, I think. David? Ti'n iawn? Fi'n gweld y wynebu.
I can see you. Are you all right? We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Ask a question.
I know you've paid tribute to everyone, all your staff, and rightly so. But I think you as well deserve a special mention because you've been thrown in by God at the deep end, and you know, you haven't had it easy. You've for various reasons, it's been a difficult situation for you anyway. And with the COVID, I think you've done a remarkable job, Hugh, as well as all your staff. So well done, and you owe me a pint when I see you next year.
Diolch, David. Os welwn ni'n gilydd eto, mi'n siŵr na i brynu peint i Hugh hefyd. Da iawn, David. Diolch yn fawr i ti fyna. Ti'n heiddio Hugh Hildys arbennig. Ni mlaen nawr at is-gadeirydd y pwyllgor hwn, cynghorydd Hugh Irving.
Good morning, everybody. Borada. I'd like to expand on one area of all the work that's gone on. I don't want to repeat everything that's being said, but I'd like to ask a little bit of clarification, please, on how, because of the distance learning that we've done so well in developing over the last year, and the very strong possibility it's going on for some significant time, how are we assisting families who are unable to provide adequate devices themselves? I'd like to know something about multi-family issues, whether within one household, children perhaps some primary, some secondary, trying to share devices, which affects signal strength if there's too much going on in a household. And I'm wondering, are there any charitable organisations that the county or the Welsh government taps into to provide resources? So that's the sort of three areas I'd like some expansion on, please.
Yeah, diolch, Hugh. Well, as I said in my opening gambit, basically, anybody who has any issues are to contact the school in the first instance, and if the school don't have a resource, we then, at county level, will address it. And that doesn't necessarily mean if there's 4 children in the house and they've got one iPad, we will still support them if they need multiple devices. And that's what I said, finding out, you can buy a keyboard for as much as £3 and fit it to the Xbox and the PlayStation, and you can run the whole thing through there. The biggest challenge is what we can't address as a local authority is if they have connection issues, because that's beyond our control. But I am not aware, and if there is anybody who needs that support and they haven't had, you must let me know, because we will endeavour to make sure that they are absolutely sorted. So we haven't got, I don't believe, anybody without a device at this moment in time. But if there is and you need it, just let us know and we'll get it sorted. We have computers and keyboards in County Hall that are outdated, if you like, but are still able to use, and we're happy to share. So we do not want any child going without.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to hear that. One aspect of it has occurred to me, that if a household was having a signal issue and they're reduced to relying on, shall we say, smartphones, if that's the right word, that are running on the telephone data, they're going to very quickly burn up their existing allowances. And that's a very expensive proposition to have hanging on over your head. So I'm just hoping that the individual schools are keeping an eye on their pupils, which I suppose this is a welfare matter, to make sure there are adequate devices, that they are connected to the education system in a manner that they can afford, and we're keeping in touch with that. Because our charities will help provide a stock of laptops or refurbished laptops. The Welsh government feel they have to operate with that field, or whether they've got adequate stocks themselves. So that'd be something else I'd like to hear from, perhaps from the GWE officials, if they got the information. Thank you.
Hugh, can I just say, want to give you reassurance, is that you will not believe how close to our children we are from such a far distance, if that makes sense. Because that has demonstrated in the referrals being lower during COVID to children's services than previous. each school has identified those children, whether they're vulnerable, whether they have issues with connections or computers or whatever, and they are tailoring the education offer to meet their needs. And that's really important. This is the extent of the work. And this is why the attitude of our teachers is really important when they say, doesn't matter what the scenario is, we'll do it. Just tell us what we have to do. And that's the attitude that's been throughout this. So I am not aware. I've been contacted once throughout the COVID by one parent about an IT issue. It was dealt with and solved the next day. The biggest issue I've got as a parent is my electric bill. I'm serious. It's gone up nearly £25 a week with a smart meter. So that's the kids' data is not a problem in my house. It's the electric bill. So they're going to have different challenges, but we will do everything we can. If there are issues with devices, you have to let us know, and we will support that.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you.
Well, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. One nice message here. A couple who are quite elderly, older than me, in Rhydlan, they came up to me and asked whether they could buy an iPad for a family who are struggling financially, and it's been accepted, and I'm taking it to the local schools. So there are good people still in our communities, and I'm glad to hear that reply you gave there, Hugh. Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to move on now to another councillor who represents part of Prestatyn, Paul Penlington.
Thank you, Chair Barada. I'd like to ask a question of Hugh, I think, probably more than Gwe, although I do appreciate Gwe have done an awful lot of work. I'm a teacher myself, I should say that, and I have many, many friends who are teachers, obviously. There's a lot of talk about how the children are faring, which is great, and they are doing well. My son's doing quite well online, all the rest of it. I don't think I've heard much about the well-being of the education staff. There was a report from government the other day that said teachers are no more at risk of contracting COVID than anybody else. However, that's just teachers. If you look at all the people who work in schools, teaching assistants, cleaners, catering staff and whatever, they're actually 4 times higher contracting COVID than the general population. They're not far behind health and care workers, to be honest. I'm wondering, I mean, I count as a key worker as a teacher, but I'm working from home, so I'm not a massive risk. But there are still a lot of people actually in schools working with key workers and children with educational needs and such like. Do Denbighshire consider these staff to be critical or key workers, and will they be put in line for a vaccination? I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but I understand that vaccinations will be given to education staff according to whether the local authority thinks they should or not. So what are we doing about vaccinating education staff still at work right now? Thank you.
Dear Paul, in our teaching community, we've got 2,500 staff involved in that in that world, and that includes cleaners, caretakers, support staff, etc. We have been fortunate is that our COVID numbers of our staff have been very low. I think the last figures I looked at, I think we had 7 that tested positive at the beginning of January out of 2,500 at that time. So, that is always being monitored. The well-being of our teachers is paramount, and this is why we've introduced the weekly meeting for Geraint, which is about not just about supporting the children, but about supporting the well-being of the staff. We have seen examples where staff have come back after the first lockdown with massive confidence, but also as the second strain virus has hit, has actually knocked their confidence. So, we are supporting them. We're putting Occy Health in place for some if they are nervous, and we are monitoring that. As for the vaccination, well, I think Nicola's here. That actually, my belief is that it's actually a Welsh Government decision, not a local authority decision. And I'm going to check that with Nicola, because that's what I believe in. Reading Public Health Wales, that's how it comes over.
Thank you, Hugh. Nicola wants to come in there, if you don't mind, as interrupting. Nicola, do you want to speak now?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
I can.
Yeah, Excellent. The prioritisation of the rollout of the vaccine across all 4 nations in the UK has been determined by the Joint Committee for Vaccinations and Immunisations. It's not a priority list that the local authority or any employer within any of the 4 nations are able to influence. In terms of the current prioritisation, which is frontline health and social care workers, that does include those working in special schools that deliver intimate personal care to children. However, it does not cover any other frontline social worker within a school setting. So we will continue to provide our employees, including those working in schools, in whatever type of employment within a school setting, with the most up-to-date information as we receive it from Welsh Government Public Health Wales. But that is the situation across the whole of the UK. All 4 nations are signed up to that prioritisation.
Thank you.
Diolch, Nicola. Paul, do you want to come back on this, Paul Pendleton?
Only to express that, I mean, it's great. I think Derbyshire are doing a good job, to be honest. But I do think teacher morale is much lower than this meeting would have you believe. Teachers, not all teachers obviously, but many teachers are actually terrified of going into school at the moment, and teaching assistants and catering workers and all the rest of it, because we know that young people are more likely to carry COVID and not realise it and pass it on. But obviously that's beyond us at the moment. That's a Welsh Government or a Westminster Government decision, but thanks for that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Paul. Da ni'n symud ymlaen nawr I cynghorydd Martin.
We'll move on now to Councillor Martin Holland, who represents Llanarmon and Iall in the area. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a general question first and foremost about the support for parents. As we all know, if you've been a school governor, if you're in education, you know that some parents are able to support their children through education by encouraging them to read and all these sorts of things, and those parents will adapt to this situation. We also know that there are some parents who struggle to support their children through those scenarios. Can I ask, how are we identifying those people and then supporting them? That's the first question. I have quite a few concerns, not so much about the report, but some questions of clarification in the whole of the report, because I did go through it. And perhaps subsequent questions are, could you just clarify what Caban is in 416, please? What do we mean by multidisciplinary units? That's in the report. Also, what is a triangle of need? That's in the report. And what do we mean by repurposing of schools? That's in the report. Mixed economy of provision is in the report. Just wonder what that is. And also self-regulation zones in primary settings. I wonder if you don't want to clarify them all today, if somebody could drop me an email just to say what that all means, that would be marvellous. And I did actually go to my Oxford English Dictionary to find out what pedagogy was. And it's nice to understand that it's the science of teaching. Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Martin. There's a few other questions I was going to ask if somebody else. Da iawn, Martin. Pwy sy'n ymateb hwnna? Mair?
Very good, Martin. Who wants to answer that? Mair.
It's a little bit difficult without contextualisation with some of the phrases, but I'll say what I can and then I'll hand over to Jackie. I'm sure she'll be able to fill in. Caban is the initial teacher training provision, which is a collaboration between Bangor University and Chester University to provide a new programme of initial teacher education. And GWER works closely with Caban and fully supports and works with that provision, which, as I'm sure you'll agree, is a very important thing for us to encourage and to keep growing, especially with Welsh language provision and in our area. In terms of multidisciplinary units, I think without seeing the contextualisation of that phrase, I think we will have used it to refer to our provision of models of work, schemes of learning that encourage teachers to plan across different subject areas. So perhaps a unit of work that we will have prepared suitable for Key Stage 3 use in a blended learning environment. As I said before, this idea of the single curriculum mindset, so what the children would be covering in school and what they're covering at home would have a synthesis. There wouldn't be a stop and start because of lockdown, return. And the multidisciplinary units would have elements, for example, perhaps of geography, literacy, numeracy, science, rather than be just subject specific. The triangle of need, I really think I'd need a contextualization to give you an answer that would be useful with that. The repurposing of schools, I think I'll have to refer to somebody else for that as well, because I imagine that refers to the hub and the the hub provision that the county has been doing. Mixed economy of provision. I can understand too that sounds jargonistic in a way, but again, I think that will be referring to the fact that one size does not fit all in terms of actually what we would be suggesting that teachers teach to children, and especially how it is taught. You will find that there is an array of different approaches to teaching at the moment, which includes synchronous and asynchronous. You've got your live lessons, you've got your pre-recorded lessons, you've got your recorded over PowerPoints, you've got your paper packs. There's a huge array of things going on. And self-regulation zones, I'll have to hand over to Jackie for that one.
Sorry, I don't know whether I'm going to be very much more and give you any more detail of that, because I didn't jot down the words that you asked. I can expand on mine, but I don't really think that I need to expand on them. If you happily put those into the chat, and then I can look at the words. I've got quite a poor signal here, and it keeps dropping in and out, so I'm only picking up elements of what people are saying. So I'm quite happy to, if you put those into the chat, and I'll come back with you about the definitions. I'm very aware that at the moment there is an awful lot of educational jargon going on, and it's you need almost a separate dictionary to work it out, and even people in education, I think, need a little bit of struggling. So I do apologise if there's if the report does contain a lot of jargon that's not very self-explanatory, but I will come back to you on that if you could just put those into.
Can I just say, obviously, we're all lay people, and from different backgrounds, and jargon doesn't help, and members will know of the committees that I'm one that always picks up on the jargon, because it is a lot easier for us. Some of those, because initially when I looked at blended learning, I thought, what the heck is that? But I could actually go down somewhere in that document, 185 pages worth, and find a button that you could press on and work that one out. So I do understand what that is. But going back to my first point, though, is the support for those parents. This is difficult times, and I really do understand the pressure that everybody's under, and I'm very grateful for the work that everybody is doing. But there are some parents who are struggling. And I remember in the first lockdown talking to somebody in my village saying, aren't we lucky that we live in a beautiful part of the world? I can walk out my door quietly on my own and go for a walk, 5-minute walk or whatever, and come back. And I thought about those parents who live on the 16th floor of a multi-story block of flats in the centre of Birmingham with 3 or 4 children, and how they were coping. And that is the difficulty now with this. Yes, it's a nice way forward, using technology in these circumstances, but not everybody can do that, and some parents will need support. So how are we identifying those people?
Schools teachers have been having very regular contact with the children when they've been at home, and any pupils that they're not having regular contact with, then they're phoning and talking to the parents.
Okay.
They are continually offering their support to parents, because they're very aware that there are some parents out there who don't have the ability to maybe help their children along the way, especially the older they get. The younger ones tend to have better support than the older ones, but teachers do phone often, at least once a week, to support parents. And what they've moved into now as part of their distance learning and their blended learning is they've started introducing videos, so parents can hear the teachers talking to the children, explaining what they need to do. So that's a better way of introducing it. But of course, this is only useful if the parents or the children are actually engaging. And what's happening is that the engagement is really high in most schools. A very small percentage of pupils in primary are not engaging, and those who are not engaging are getting things via paper, and then the teacher will phone up to explain to the parents, you know, what they need to do, and offer them the support that way.
Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
With other people I want to ask questions. Guy James.
Could I James Brown in first? He's asked before you, Hugh. James Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought I would explain about the repurposing of schools. This was referring to the first lockdown when the schools were closed and they were then reopened as childcare hubs rather than delivering education. And there's a distinct difference between childcare and education provision. I hope that helps, Chair.
Can I ask you a question then, James? I've got a school in the local area where I live. They had to close for a week. And it was a hub. It is a hub school, I think. But there are essential workers who have children in the school. Were they allowed to go to another school?
That was a very difficult situation this time. I know the school you're referring to, and the decision by Environmental Health to remove almost all of the staff from the school. The school opens again tomorrow, I think, so it was a 4-day closure that the head had to take because she had no staff to run the school. The problem with moving children to another school, as I'm sure you can understand, is that those children then mix in other bubbles. And therefore, if there was an issue, we have potential transmission of an infection to another school and then back again.
Diolch I ti, James. Dwi'n deall yna. Ond mi oedd yna rieni yn
Thank you, James. There were parents contacting me wanting to know what the situation was. Do you want to come back in on that? Yes, if I may.
Jackie's covered the support, but one area that we have identified as being quite challenged during this time is for Welsh-speaking children who are in Category 1 education, but don't have Welsh-speaking parents. So we've identified that, and the schools are working alongside and adding extra support in there. And we know in some schools even parents are supporting parents because with homework and etc. But I think what the committee need to understand is children are physically having Zoom live lessons like we are now. And I was told of one boy last week who for the last 3 weeks has found out that he has the ability to change the name on the Zoom, and he had his name and changed to reconnecting, so he never got asked a question by the teacher. So there's some creative people out there. So it is happening. It is live, and I've witnessed my son having them, and the teachers are answering questions as on the go, if you like, as they would in a classroom, just to give you some reassurance.
Diolch yn fawr, Hugh. Ac yn ymlaen,
Thank you, Hugh. We'll now move on to a member who isn't a councillor, but Kathleen Jones. An opportunity for you now to ask a question.
I'm quite concerned that every time I hear about learning, everything revolves around digital learning, and I can understand that that's really important. It's really important that families have a computer. I'm wondering how much work's been done to support parents, where when that computer's being used by one member of the family, the others could perhaps quite legitimately be making models or working with Play-Doh or construction, and they're all learning, and how much work is being put to help the parents use the things that they've got at home to be able to engage children, so that there's not this big scramble and everybody working on digital activities. there doesn't seem to be anything to say that. And some parents might not be able to afford these, but other people, like they could give their laptops, might be able to offer some packs of Play-Doh or some material or some cardboard or some activities and activity packs. And it's just a way of supporting parents to be able to get over this only having one laptop, which we hear all the time. There's more to learning, and I understand it's important, but parents need to not be pressured into thinking that everybody can only learn if they're on a computer. Thank you.
Dwi'n da iawn, Hugh, beth sy'n wneud am hynna?
Yeah, no, I think your point, but I think people are getting maybe the wrong message when we're saying learning. The computer access to communicate with the pupil, which is very different. So, for example, let me give you a task that my daughter had, which was she had to be creative around numbers using things in the autumn from outside, yeah, like leaves and stuff, and not write numbers. Another thing I've seen is collect different shaped stones for a 3 or 4-year-old to do, put numbers on them so they learn the counting, video it, and send it back to your teacher. So there are outdoors activities with sand, for example, with craft. That the computer is not necessarily just the learning; it's the setting of tasks and work for the child to report back. So there is a lot of that going on.
Hugh, I totally understand all of that, but I'm just thinking some parents might need help with the provision of things like Play-Doh or construction. People can help other people by providing these materials. That's all I was thinking. If we've got a big push on providing digital things, shouldn't we also be looking just through the media, even from the council, saying these are other ways that you can help your child while they're waiting for their turn on the computer. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, fair point. We can.
Iawn, Hugh.
Thank you, Hugh. Mair wants to come back on that.
I was just going to add, completely agree. There are so many different means by which children need to learn now, and perhaps we overemphasize the communicating of information around digital, because that has been the greatest challenge in order to go from something that was used incidentally and by choice to something that is forming, certainly in the secondary sector, a significant part of how learning is happening. But you're quite right, one of the main things we've done is supported through our guidance on the planning, real time being taken on the planning for the purpose of the learning that's being provided, so that all the learning is purposeful. And I know, Jackie will be able to tell you more should you need, but I know the primary schools have been incredibly reactive to this as well by putting together packs of resources for parents to use at home, so that learning can be non-digital, as indeed it still needs to be as well.
Thank you. Time is running out, and we've got another item to discuss. Thank you, Mair, and thank you, Kathleen. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Andrew Thomas, who represents St Asaph.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, my questions are very much of a general nature, so they're not specific. I think I'll send an email to Hugh and ask for some responses. I couldn't understand what GWE was, for instance. I know what it does, but what it does, I don't know where it's going in the future and things like that. And I would concur that there's so much words and so much blarney comes out of it, and statements that are made up should be perfectly obvious, such as I cite 417, the next steps. I would have thought it was perfectly obvious, those next steps, and they didn't need to be spelt out. And it's a pity that they have to be spelt out. And added to that, there are no sort of measures as to how you measure performance. So really, it's a lot of words to say very little at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on now to a representative from Rail, Councillor Welly Chad.
Thank you, Arwell, and nice seeing everybody this fine day. My question is to the Gway ladies, Jackie and Mair, sharing resources, a support centre. Is it a physical building or is it a virtual? I just wanted to know. Okay, thank you.
Take this on, Maya. Ellie, I think that if you do take some time to look at the Appendix 2,
yeah,
there's a good example of what the support centre is. It's not a physical building. It is a virtual centre, whereby there's a lot of information, which might also help answer Kathleen's question as well about the support that is given to the kind of support and the style of the support that's given to all the home learning, so to the parents and to the pupils. The information is within that support centre.
Great, thank you. And that's a good overall answer. Thank you very much.
It's the one-stop shop for all of the resources.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All the members of the committee have had an opportunity to ask questions now, so I'm going to go to two members who are outside the committee, and we're going to start with Councillor Emrys Swyn, who represents Ruthin. Thank you, Chair, and could I also reiterate all the thanks that have been conveyed this morning. I've got two questions. I hope that's all right, Chair. I'll read them as they are. We've already heard and we know that teachers and school staff are specialists in burning the candles at both ends, as it were. They're used to having to prepare for the week ahead and so on, a week ahead sometimes when things change at short notice. And that's where the first question comes from. Is the local education authority in Gway, do they challenge the government when they announce changes with hardly any notice? For example, I remember one announcement being made which meant that staff of schools had teaching staff had to spend a weekend in their schools in order to prepare for the following Monday. Is that kind of situation challenged by Gway and the local education authority? I hope it's going to be a positive answer. And the second question, and Hugh has already touched on this, but it doesn't quite come to the same place in terms of the Welsh language. Has a review been made of the provision for non-Welsh speaking parents so that they can help their children, and also to provide opportunities for their children to hear and use the Welsh language at home? This isn't for a question to do with Welsh medium category 1 schools. This is a question for all primary and secondary schools in the county where the Welsh needs to be used. With children in non-Welsh speaking schools, the only contact that they have with the Welsh language quite often is at the school. In the Welsh school, when it's open, there's contact during school hours and what the school can provide, but there's a great difference. This contact is very important. It gives children the opportunity to use and hear the language, whether it's first or second language. Thank you. We'll start with Hugh Hilditch to answer that question. Thank you. With regards to the first question, I think I have been quite outspoken about the government and the way they announce changes. They don't give details straight away. They expect us, there are some situations, for example, the situation in the summer where in July they said that transport that's what the transport would be, but they provided no details until a month later. So we as a county had to sort out those details ourselves to know how to react. We took a decision before schools went back in January. We decided not to open in Denbighshire until the 11th, I think it was, because we felt it was important that we gave enough time for parents and also for teachers to prepare and act accordingly. And I think that's what's important. We work very closely with Arwyn in Gway and every other county in North Wales. We've written to Kirsty Williams on a few subjects and matters together because we don't think they provide enough fairness for teachers in schools. We often challenge, and our greatest challenge now is to get an understanding of what the exams will be like next year. That's the big question. What are teachers teaching for in order to be assessed in future? That's the next challenge. At the end of that, could I ask, do the government listen to these challenges? Well, maybe they hear it, but I'm not sure if they listen. To be honest, the government have listened in terms of assessing examinations this year rather than going through to another system. So they do think the teacher assessments are important. So there are elements that they do listen to. But who would want to be Kirsty Williams at the moment? Because things do change so quickly. And sometimes the strong leadership by Kirsty isn't supported by her officials with regards to detail, and that's the gap for me in this. She has listened a few times, not always, but we're still talking. I've been on Zoom with her. She's very open to take our opinions. So I hope that we can cooperate and reach the right place. And the question, if you could answer now about the Welsh medium provision for all schools, category 5 to 1. I'll come in first, and I'm sure Maid will want to say something. But obviously, children are going to hear more Welsh if they're in school, aren't they? It's a fact. We can never match that digitally. Every school is working on the curriculum, and Welsh is part of that, and they will be doing tasks in Welsh digitally and learning through the medium of Welsh digitally. I know some schools, along with the parents, have Zoom meetings where parents bring the children in to speak as well, so that all the children can mix together because they don't see each other, and then they use the language there to chat. I think this is one of the biggest challenges in this situation, and we've looked and seen that one school in Denbighshire has been affected more than the others. I'm talking about category 1 school here now. And we're putting more work in that school to help and support parents. And there are no the nursery groups at the moment, and that's very important for the Welsh language, because that's where they learn the Welsh language when they're young. No research has been taken place, but because the plan is to get children back in schools, but we know where the weaknesses are, and we're working on that. I'll come in briefly there, but I agree with everything you've said, Hugh. There is a piece of work to be done in moving forward to look at the effect on the Welsh language, and as you say, on children who have Welsh medium education but who are from a non-Welsh speaking family. There is a lot of support for schools through the clusters to recognise the children and families who need support and who need some kind of more creative provision in terms of adding to the Welsh medium education. Lots of resources are being shared, individual provisions, and I think one of the other positive effects, as I said before, about the cooperation that is happening. Lots of creative things are happening in Welsh medium schools to ensure that, for example, in primary schools, teachers read over the screen Welsh stories to the children, so that they can hear the Welsh language being spoken. Yes, this is a priority for GWE and a priority for every authority, certainly. And it's a job to be done in moving forward. Could I respond, Emrys? This is going on. We're running late, and we've got one other councillor to ask a question. Councillor Mary Lloyd Davis. Thank you. Very briefly, could I thank every teacher, obviously, and the whole workforce? And I'd like to reiterate that. And moving to the words, these jargon words, I'm surprised that the specialists couldn't understand some of them, so we as councillors have got no hope, have we? But if you would be as kind as maybe provide a list of these and what they mean, thank you for that anyway. But my question is, are there any schools who have had some parents bringing children into school even though they're not at the moment working as key workers? That's fair enough with the jargon, Mary. I'm sure we'll sort that out. This time, compared to the first lockdown, how you know who are key workers? Well, it's up to the school itself, whereas it wasn't the first time. So that work has been done school by school. And we have been lucky in Denbighshire that we haven't had too many problems compared with some counties. I've spoken to representatives from some counties who've had a lot of problems. But what we've found is that if you go to the list of key workers, if you're in the hospitality, you're not on the list, but everybody else is on the list. That's the reality almost. It's so open this time. The list is so open. It was a lot narrower last time. So it's very difficult for schools not to accept some children because they're on the list. So the message from Denbighshire is, if there are parents who work from home, if there are older brothers and sisters who are home and who are old enough to look after the younger children, well, for them to stay at home, because it's safer at the moment for children to be at home, and we will support them with education. But so the purpose, but Denbighshire say, if you're not a key worker, stay at home, but if you are, the schools are open for you. Thank you. Are you happy with that, Mary? Thanks very much. Could I move on now to bring this agenda item to an end?
Scrutiny members are invited to discuss the details of this report and, if appropriate, to make recommendations how to improve the support available to learners and to identify any aspects of the recovery work which may benefit from detailed examination in the future. Well, do we meddwl bod ni 'di rhoi?
Well, I think we've scrutinised this well.
Well, and I second what David Williams said earlier. Diolch yn fawr iawn I ti, Hugh.
Thank you, Hugh.
On you also has been fantastic. Diolch hefyd I...
Could I also thank members of GWE?
Is the, what can we call it? It covers all of North Wales as far as education is concerned, and they work together with every county. And I think we should thank you, Mair, thank you, Jackie, and thank you all who have been involved. I'm going to ask someone to propose that we are happy with what we've done today. Can someone propose, please? Martin, diolch yn fawr, Martin. Can someone second? Hugh Irving, sorry, Peter. Hugh Irving has seconded. We all agreed that this has been a very good work we've done today, and we have pressurised poor Hugh Hilditch and others very well indeed. Diolch yn fawr I chi. Diolch yn fawr. Before we move on, I would like a proposal also that that I, as the chair of this committee, send a letter of thanks to all schools, all head teachers and staff, and every staff that are involved in schools, that we as a committee are very, very grateful to all the work that they have done during COVID and still doing. I propose that. Can someone second it, please? Thank you, Hugh. And can we all agree that, please? Diolch yn fawr iawn. Felly, rwan, dwi am...
So now I'm going to ask for an opportunity for us to have a break and come back in 10 minutes. Okay, thanks very much.
Well, if I can just ask you a question.
Yes.
Well, when you were a teacher, or you were a head teacher, weren't you?
Yes.
Did you work with GWE?
No, they came to... I retired in the year 2008.
Yeah.
They weren't in position till about 2014.
No, I remember them coming to presentation when they started. Yes, you're right. But they must have followed on from something else, mustn't they?
Yeah. Perhaps Neil knows more than I do, because you're a bit younger than me, Neil, aren't you? Yes.
About 2009.
Yeah.
Basically, what happened was the school standards element of the local authority.
But what are they doing? What are they doing that we couldn't be doing?
Yes, excuse me, Hugh. We've got to restart the meeting. We're live.
Okay, no, it's okay. That's fine.
Sorry.
Right.
Very interesting discussion.
We'll talk again.
Perhaps you send an email to Hugh Hildis. He'll answer you.
I've already planned to do that.
Okay. Well, diolch yn fawr ydi pawb.
Thank you. Has everybody arrived back now?
Instead of Geraint, James Curran, croeso, Ian Land, and Hugh Hildis is still here. He's had a very busy morning. Wedi cael bore prysur iawn. Ag, da ni'n mynd mlaen.
We'll move on now to the next item on the agenda. Is everybody here, do you think? Officers?
Gan ni un newydd wedi cyrraedd.
We've got one new member who's joined us, Councillor Mabon Ap Gwynfor. Right, I'll make a start then, and we'll move on to item number 6. I'll read this in English.
Da ni yma to provide an overview of school transport requirements as they apply to Welsh language schools under the Learner Travel Wales measure, which is incorporated in the authority's own transport policy 2018. To provide an overview of the Welsh language categorization of schools and how this applies to school transport.
So there are two elements to this. Could we have an explanation by either officers or by Hugh Hilditch Roberts? Thanks very much. Yes, I'll start.
To be honest with you, this paper comes a little prematurely to the committee, maybe, because for those of us who have been on the council for a few years now, we've seen the learner transport policy come every year almost, I think, to scrutiny in some guys. The situation is that we are currently still working the new policy from 2018, where we probably had maybe a couple of contentious issues, but we've dealt with them individually and made sure that everybody has no pupils have suffered. As it currently stands, it's free transport for those provided who live over 2 miles from their nearest suitable primary school, and for the secondary school it's over 3 miles, and everything is sort of as was last year and the year before that we've been to the committee. The biggest fundamental change that's coming is that there is currently 2 consultations out with Welsh Government on the school transport policy and the recategorisations of schools. And we as Denbighshire, on the language side, the WESP has responded, and we have submitted the consultation into Welsh Government, and obviously we, as from Transport, we are doing the same. I personally, we have to wait to see what the outcomes of these consultations are and what the policies are, because I believe that there is, especially on the language side, there'll be some massive implications on some of how we deliver Welsh language in some of our schools if they decide to make extreme changes. And one of those potential changes could be, for example, is taking the Category 2 school out. So you take Bryn Hyfryd, you take Dinas Bran, and they would have to either decide to deliver one way or the other. And that could be, that potentially for me is a real concern, because they are delivering a bilingual offer, if you like, now, which is one of Category 2 and one of Category 1 in the same building. But the funding formula may change if they change the category. So that's something we've got to be very wary of going forward. So ideally for me, happy to take them through the questions, but I think the position we need to be in is when the consultation is over, that we call that into scrutiny and that we go through it as councillors then and see what that is and how we tear that apart and how it works for Denbighshire. I think that would be more fundamental for us going forward. But happy to take questions as usual.
Hugh, oes unrhyw un o swyddogion?
Do any of the officers want to come in? I don't think at the moment. Are there any questions from anybody from the committee to begin with? Thank you. I'll give you a little bit of explanation. I had a message from one of the parents who are hoping to send their children to Ysgol Glan Clwyd, and they live in the Llanrhaeadr area. They have a right, in their opinion, to have an entirely Welsh medium education. Ysgol Bro Ceinmerch, of course, is a Welsh medium school, and there is a tradition that children from there can go either to Ysgol Glan Clwyd. At the moment, the only choice they have is to pay for their own transport or go to Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd. That's why this item has come before us, and Hugh is correct. There are two reports to come out from the Welsh Government, and a gentleman called Lee Walters has been behind this. He works, he's a member of the Senedd, and he's held back on this. Is that correct, Hugh? Yes, that's correct. And the reports are coming out, I think, in March. So, is there a member of the committee who wants to ask a question? I can't see any hands up. Oh, Martin wants to ask a question. Thank you, Martin.
I have flagged up on the electric hands up, so and I think there are a couple of other people there are well. But anyway, it's just overall, I've read through the policy again, and I probably have somebody from every one of the categories that we have, because I'm a rural ward. I'm on the border with Flintshire and with Wrexham, and so I have pupils who are travelling into Flintshire. So overall, having read this again, I think it's in many ways just a case of rubber stamping this. But I have just a couple of quick questions. I've had some instances recently where people have moved into the ward, into Denbighshire, from Flintshire, for example, and then they've asked that their children still remain at schools in Flintshire where they were, where before they moved. I can see the logic in some ways. It's nice not to move children during their education, but of course that puts quite a burden on us because we're having to consider providing school transport for them. And also just the one that always I have a question over is this dual residency. And I understand again, there's situations where families break up, that there's a need for, sometimes for the children to stay with one parent and then another. But am I right in saying that actually they have to have a prime residence, and that's the residence that they actually get the school transport support from?
I'll come back. I'll come on the first question, and I think.
Yes, I can assist with that one here.
Diolch, Hugh.
But on the first one, and maybe this is is my thought process, and maybe if I'm wrong, Ian will correct me as well. But if I decided to move to, let's just say, Wrexham tomorrow, and I wanted my child to continue their education in Ysgol Penbarras in Ruthin, I believe that unless that is the nearest suitable school for my child, it is my parental choice, and I would have to take the responsibility of taking that child to school. It's not a local authority burden. We would only fund if it is the most suitable school for that child and that they qualify under the learner transport policy. Am I right, Ian?
You are correct there, Hugh. Yeah.
Oh, see, I have read it at some point. So that is parental choice. So for example, if they move from Flint into Llanarmon, Martin, and they want to remain in Flint, that would be up to them. But if that school in Flint was the only suitable school for them, yes, we would have to fund them the same as we would any other child. And do you want to come back on the second point, Ian, please?
Yeah, just further to add to the first point, Hugh, if I may, please. Martin, for any of those who don't fall within the eligibility criteria, we do signpost them to other methods, because some of the public service providers out there provide things like scholar passes, which are at a reduced cost. So we do signpost them to other options where they're not eligible, so they can continue with their education at their current school. But as Hugh's mentioned there, it does come down to parental responsibility, and the legislation is quite clear on that element. On the second point, under dual residency, you're quite right, and this is an issue the authority come up against quite a number of times, is that you are supposed to have a defined home location where they're defined to be ordinarily resident. Now, when you have a dual residency situation with families very sadly splitting up, then quite often both of them wish to vie for that property to become the de facto home residence. At the moment, the authority usually recognises the home residence to be where the child benefit is paid in regards to that pupil. However, I can add that in regards to one of the consultations which is mentioned in the paper, the one regarding the learner travel measure, Welsh Government have asked a number of questions around this area of local authorities, and we've responded accordingly, highlighting some of the issues that we've come across regarding dual residency previously. So it is on Welsh Government's radar in terms of how they define home for pupils. And we've responded accordingly to highlight any issues that we've come across previously. I hope that's answered the question.
You're happy with that, Martin? Diolch yn fawr. Unrhyw un arall o'r pwyllgor angen nôl at dwi'n symud ymlaen i'r rhai tu allan i'r pwyllgor rwan, a mi gychwynna i...
We'll move on now to Councillor Mabon ap Gwynfor, please. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for allowing me to join the meeting and take part. It's good to hear that the government are looking at this, and as Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts said, that elements of this are a bit premature, but we must also remember that there are pupils who are now studying and looking to move on to secondary school who are affected, and we must keep them in mind and think what is best for them. The Chair did mention pupils at Ysgol Bro Cynmerch, which is a they traditionally go to Ysgol Glan-Clwyd, and children from there have gone to Glan-Clwyd but are now being sent to Bryn Hyfryd. They are sent to Bryn Hyfryd on the basis that the educational provision there is in Welsh. But the choice of the parents of pupils at Bro Cynmerch is that they have an entirely Welsh medium education. Now, it comes down to what the definition of entirely Welsh medium means. Anyone who uses their common sense would say that entirely means 100% Welsh medium education. But Denbighshire's policy say that 80% is the definition of Welsh medium education. And on paper, therefore, Bryn Hyfryd reaches that threshold, and therefore Denbighshire offers free transport from Bro-Cynmerch, from pupils from the Bro-Cynmerch area to go to Bryn Hyfryd. But unfortunately, that is, 80% isn't an entire Welsh medium provision. That's the first point. And on that basis, I think free transport should be considered for pupils from Bro-Cynmerch who want to go to Glenclwyd on the basis that their choice is Welsh language education. But as I said, it's on paper, it's 80%. If a pupil goes to school, they may have this idea in Bryn Hyfryd that Welsh medium education is available 80% of the time. But the truth about it is, by the time they reach age 9, year 9, and choose their subjects for GCSE, quite often those subjects aren't available through the medium of Welsh. For example, in 2019, art and design, business, IT, food, nutrition, health and social care, animal care, they were all subjects that were only available through the medium of English. According to the parents of those of that age group, only 6 subjects were available through the medium of Welsh for pupils who wanted Welsh medium education at Bryn Hyfryd in 2019. So that, on any count, even on the 80% threshold, offers a Welsh medium education. And these pupils have reached the school in year 7 on the understanding that they get a Welsh medium education, but as they move on to do their GCSEs, they have to choose these subjects through the medium of English, or they are forced to leave their friends to attend another school to get Welsh medium GCSE provision. That isn't fair, it isn't right on any level. It isn't a Welsh medium provision, and we must think of the needs of these children and what they want. Also, some would argue, and I think some people in the authority have argued in the past, that some Welsh medium pupils choose English medium subjects, and that's true in Bryn Hyfryd, but consider why. If the majority of their friends choose a subject through the medium of English and the subject they want to study through the medium of Welsh is not offered, well, then naturally they're going to choose an English medium subject because that's where their friends will be. So that is why I think until we get this report from Welsh Government into categorising schools and transport to schools, in the meantime, we must think about the cohort of pupils who wish Welsh medium education, and in this case, the individual I won't name, for example, who attends Bro-Cynmerch, she should have free transport to the Welsh medium education provision closest to her, and that being Ysgol Glenclwyd. Do you want to come back to answer that? Yes, thank you, Mabon. Like transport, this happens every year, this discussion happens every year. And as a former pupil at Ysgol Bro-Cynmerch myself, and a parent to a child at Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd at the moment, my son has Welsh medium education. And he's in year 10 and he does every subject through the medium of Welsh in that year. What I want to make clear is this isn't to do with Bryn Hyfryd standards compared to Glenclwyd. It's the children's choice for Welsh medium education. I believe, I'll turn into English now because I'm going to speak to Ian.
That when we have raised this before, and I remember attending a meeting with Karen Evans on this, where the difficulty is where the school is located in Llanrwst, is that people will live either side of the school. So if you go to Llanrwst school, but you live Ruthin side, under the school the learner transport policy, you will then be directed to Bryn Hyfryd as the nearest suitable school, because in the eyes of the learner transport, 80% in category 2 is Welsh government guidelines, not Denbighshire's. The Bryn Hyfryd are meeting that, so therefore it matches with the policy. So this is, again, when I said at the beginning, what the new policy and the categorization, transport policy and the categorization of schools really need to consult each other so that it stacks up, that we're not in this situation in the future. Now, the last time this row cropped up, we actually granted those children the opportunity to attend Ysgol Glan-Clwyd, didn't we, Ian? And we actually funded that. Is that right?
No, some of those did travel on concession receipts, Hugh,
Right.
which were available at that time. However, there is a restriction presently in place in regards to public sector vehicle regulations on the authority being able to offer any further concessions for transport on council services.
So it was concessionary bus passes that we allowed them to have, yeah?
Yes, in some instances they were paying for a free of a vacant seat on a council service at that time. However, as I mentioned, we're no longer able to do that due to legislative restrictions across the whole of the UK, not just in Wales, relating to public service buses and being able to sell seats on those services that the council is running.
Okay, so just talk to me for a second, Ian. Then is that if I am the parent of this child,
yeah,
and on paper there is an 80% offer,
yes,
in Bryn Hyfryd, which potentially would mean that if I want to do CDT and home economics in Welsh in year 10, but it wasn't available on the curriculum because it was part of the 20% that wasn't run because of the budget.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to, Babon, basically, is the budget of the school. That's why they have to reduce the curriculum. The only way that I could get my child to Ysgol Glan-Clwyd now, if I lived the Rhythyn side of Llanrydder, would be by paying for it myself or taking them myself.
That is correct. Obviously, in regard, as you mentioned previously, Hugh, for the purposes of the assessment process, the schools, albeit the dual stream, the Welsh side and Glan-Clwyd, would be considered the same in that context.
Yeah.
Therefore, with Broughimach also being part of Bryn Hyfryd's cluster,
yeah,
if that's the nearest suitable school, they would get transport there. But conversely, if another family happened to live on the other side and Glan-Clwyd does become the nearest suitable school, this is all about the fact that the legislation is driven by the calculation of distance from a home location. And in any situation where you've got that, you're going to have a situation where you have those who get transport and those who don't. And that's not just in relation to Welsh medium education. That's also in relation to English medium schools. So it's a problem parents will experience regardless of the medium which they're having their son or daughter taught in.
Okay, so let's turn it on its head for a second then. Sorry, I don't mean to be doing the scrutiny. I'm just trying to understand it so we all understand it clearly. So if my child goes to Llanrydder School, and I live in, let's just say, the Denbigh side of Llanrydder,
yes,
and I want an English education, my nearest suitable school for transport would be Denbigh High, wouldn't it?
It could possibly be, yes. Obviously, again, this is calculated on an individual basis.
Yeah, if I live near Brookhouse Mill, for example, most people know where Brookhouse Mill is, don't you? Yeah. You know, so if you live there, so therefore, but I'm in a Bryn Hyfryd cluster school, which is Broughimach, but if I wanted transport, it was to go to Denbigh High, yeah?
No, there is another, in terms of the fact that Bryn Hyfryd, obviously, when we developed the policy, we had a number of situations in which Martin will understand what I'm talking about here, whereby you have some who are attending our feeder schools for a particular secondary who could not attend the secondary school because it wasn't the nearest, and they were there and they were part of that cluster, and the transition work was happening with that school. So what happened when we developed the policy, and again, this all went through scrutiny and the explanation provided to scrutiny at that time, we developed the feeder school relationship. So if you'd been attending Ysgol Broughimach and it was your nearest suitable Welsh language primary school at that point of admission, you were technically eligible for transport to Bryn Hyfryd because of the feeder relationship. So you mentioned there, Hugh, about English language. You know, if you wanted English or Welsh, we do have to consider both aspects. But because Brookynmach is part of the cluster for Bryn Hyfryd, there is another element which comes in, and that's the feeder relationship between Brookynmach and Bryn Hyfryd itself, which we have to take into account. That was built in to allow students and pupils to stay with a particular cohort within their cluster.
Thank you. I don't want this to be a chat between Hugh Hilditch and Ian Land entirely, but what is important here is that Denbighshire sets the policy for learner transport. So hopefully this transport will be changed soon so that people who wish to have their education entirely through the medium of Welsh have a better consideration than they get at the moment, not only at Ysgol Brookynmach, but there are also other schools in the Llangollen area, for example. Could I move forward now to Councillor Emrys Wyn? Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mabon has already referred to the problems. The problem is the parent's choice between Category 1 and Category 2. That choice isn't available at the moment from Ysgol Brookynmach, the school that's been discussed here today. And it's a shame because people want education entirely through the medium of Welsh. And at the moment, it's available in a Category 1 school. And I ask kindly, Councillor, we're asking Denbighshire County Council to meet the needs of those parents who wish Category 1 education for their children. Information has been shared about the provision at Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd. I've also got information that I've received as well. They don't always go with what has been shared here today, and I think we must confirm what exactly the provision is for Welsh medium education at Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd too. Thank you, Emrys, for that. That's an excellent point. There's one person outside the committee who wants to say a word, and that's Councillor Mary Lloyd Davis. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do feel and agree entirely regarding Ysgol Brookynmach, Llanrhaeadr. We did raise this a few years ago, and we're still at it. Ian Lan also mentioned the transport issue. They're not allowed, if I understand quite rightly, go to Denby if they cannot go on the bus to Glenclwyd, which is a bit strange to me, because if the parents are willing to transport their children to Denby to catch the bus, I think Pantypasternog School, Prion, do that. I'm not quite sure. Have you changed the rules there? It's important that if the government want Welsh speakers to attain 1 million speakers by 2050, it's important that we make it convenient for children to have Welsh medium provision in all aspects of education. Councillor Hilditch Roberts mentioned the response to the government. I would like a copy of the response, please, so that we can understand what the inquiry was. Thank you, Mairead.
May I come back in there, if that's possible, please? Just in regards to the consultation, I can happily share with you what we put in that particular element, but we have, as an authority, made it very clear that we would expect Welsh Government to have a very close connection between the new categorisation system, which they're also consulting on, and linking that to transport. And we said there needs to be a very clear connection between those two things, and you would expect those two policies, when they change, to dovetail together. So it's very clear for parents and for authorities alike as to the basis upon which transport is given, and that should be linked to categorisation in the Welsh medium instance. Hope that's helped.
Diolch yn fawr, Ian.
Ian. Can I ask a question to Ian? Imagine there's a brother and a sister in the same family, and one has already he attends Ysgol Glan Clwyd, and his sister would like to follow him. But now this policy would stop that. How is the county answering that?
In terms of the current policy, I'd firstly say that I have the utmost confidence that the policy that we have in place for transport within Denbighshire presently meets, from a legal perspective, everything we're required to do under the legislation and the measure. For that example you mentioned there, obviously, if a sister or a brother had gone to the school previously and they were from the same home location, obviously their basis of transport would have been calculated on the same for the sibling as it would be for the new progression to year 7, for example. So if they had been provided with transport previously, it would follow that they are meeting the eligibility criteria as per section 3.3, and we would provide transport for the sibling. If they hadn't, then obviously we wouldn't be providing transport. The only exception to that, Chair, is that I mentioned there about previously some concessions had been permitted from that area, but the parents then paid for those concessions, and unfortunately the local authority, due to the regulatory change, is no longer able to offer those concessionary seats.
Okay, there is, I suppose, a bus that goes from Ysgol Twmanant, the children who have been in Ysgol Twmanant from Denby, and they are given transport to go to Ysgol Glan Clwyd. Is it possible for a little minibus to be provided to go from Ysgol Bro Cymerch to join that bigger bus?
If that was a service that the school themselves were starting and working with passenger transport, and it was being charged then to the parents, that is something completely separate from what we're discussing here in terms of the policy. I'd say that to do anything other than check eligibility against what we have in the policy presently could possibly open up the authority to challenge in a number of areas, because it could come down to, you know, decisions on being looked at on a quality basis. And as I said, I've got the utmost confidence presently that the policy that we have in place, which has been legally tested, meets the full requirement of the duty. What I would say is that we seem to be in a situation presently where we've got 2 consultations running, which are going to impact legislation in these areas. And as Hugh mentioned at the outset, it seems a little premature to kind of consider any options at the moment. But we have made it clear to Welsh Government via the consultation of the issues that we experience around this area. And I'm hoping that they will understand from us and others as to the implications of that and adjust the legislation, perhaps, you know, to match the categorisation.
Councillor
Mabon Gwynfor wants to come back. Thank you, Chair. If I could reiterate what Councillor Hugh Hilditch said at the beginning, Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd provides the best possible education. The education is excellent there. I've got family there. We're not discussing that. The discussion so far has been very interesting, but has failed on one of the basic elements that I presented, which, according to the policy that we have at the moment, that free transport is provided to children who wish to receive Welsh medium education, and on paper that is 80%, and on paper Bryn Hyfryd provides it, but there is no assurance for a pupil who goes into year 7 that that pupil will receive at least 80% of his education through the medium of Welsh as that child progresses through the school years. So based on that there isn't an assurance that the provision of 80%, and you can't provide that assurance because the decision is made from year to year depending on how many pupils choose what subject and if there's a Welsh medium teacher available. Because of that insecurity in the system, then there is no means of saying that Bryn Hyfryd can provide 80% Welsh medium provision. And therefore, until the new provision, until the Welsh Government bring out a new policy, free school transport for pupils from Bro Kinmer, for example, to go Glenclwyd should be provided, so where there is an assurance they can get entirely Welsh medium education. That is the basis of what I'm discussing with you this morning. James, do you want to come back? I don't disagree with you, Mabon. On black and white, that's what it is. The only other option which has been offered in the past years is for Ysgol Bro Kinmer to change cluster. And if they were to join the Glenclwyd cluster, then they'd be a feeder school to Glenclwyd. But what I'm not arguing with you, but I'm trying to reason the other side for a moment. You've got schools such as Carreg Emlyn, Ysgol Penbaras, with very good standards in the medium of Welsh, and all those children go to Bryn Hyfryd. But maybe on paper that it's not 100%, but I've got confidence in terms of Bryn Hyfryd, where they can, they do try and provide Welsh medium education. We're down to funding, aren't we? And unless these second category schools come this year now, they must decide one way or the other. Because 80% on paper is nothing, is it? You're in or you're out. This is the same argument as primary schools, category school children, where you have a choice of Welsh or English provision. You choose which way you're assessed. It's not a bilingual school, as people say, because you choose either Welsh or English education there. To me, category 1 is the bilingual school because they are taught in Welsh and English, but that's another argument. Don't go into that. So our hands are tied to an extent. This has worked successfully to an extent over the years. I think it was 80% when I was at Bryn Hyfryd, so I don't think it's changed a lot. But the only way is if these children if they fall outside the policy, well, then I'm willing, because the policy is due to change in the future. I think we look at these individually and have a chat with the families. That's what I would suggest. And I'm sure Ian would agree with me on that. Thank you all for that. And could I bring Ellie in here? She's a member of the committee. Welcome, Ellie, again.
Okay. My question is, I mean, I've got lots of stories about bus transport, having worked in a school for many years. Are there pupil spaces in Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd for the extra pupils requiring the 80% Welsh and 20 Saesneg education? That's my question, because I'm concerned now about Ysgol Glenclwyd. If they're, thinking, oh yes, that little family will be coming along and what have you. So that's a question. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Who wants to come in? Emrys, I can see that you had your hand up and you're a governor at Ysgol Bryn Hyfryd. Do you want to? Yes. Could I just correct what's just been said now? Bryn Hyfryd don't teach 80% in Welsh and 20 in English. It's 100% in English and it's 80% in Welsh. And I think that's very important to make that clear. But I would like to just... This 80% business is causing a problem. I've been speaking this morning to the Chair of Governors, and he has assured me that key stages 3 and 4, 80% is the provision for Welsh medium education, and they're working towards that in the 6th form as well. that's why I proposed earlier that we should be holding a review in order to confirm these figures, because we're getting Mabon and I have received different information from different places. Nobody is trying to trick us here. We want to know the truth, and it's important that we do that. I would almost like to see this committee leave this until it's been raised in another committee after these reviews have happened. Well, that will be our plan anyway, Emrys. Martin now, please.
Can't hear you. Unmute, please.
Sorry, there we go. Finger trouble. We have a policy which I personally believe is quite flexible and has accommodated numerous issues in my ward. But why we continue to debate this at the moment when we know that there's something coming out of Welsh Government that may change all of this anyway? And surely we would be better now waiting for that, after that consultation, to hear what Welsh Government are going to say. It may solve some of the problems that you're raising today. On the other hand, it could create a lot more. Depends what comes out of that statement. But I think at this stage in the game, we have a policy that's very, very good, very firm, and it accommodates most people, certainly in my ward. And so why not just wait now until we hear from Welsh Government?
Are you proposing that, Martin? Yeah.
Yeah, I would propose that.
And Hugh has seconded that. Okay. Dyna ni felly
There we are then.
We are waiting for Lee Waters to bring this as soon as possible from the Welsh Government regarding transport to the schools. And it is Denbighshire, I may say, Denbighshire which provides the policy of transport themselves. You do the policy, don't you, Ian? We are in charge of the policy, not the Welsh Government. And we would hopefully that these little matters, that when a child wants to go to a fully school which teaches the medium Welsh, like Ysgol Glan-Clwyd or Ysgol Maes Garmon, which is in Flintshire, that they will provide this for us in the future. It's not the county's fault. We have tried our best, and but you must remember there's a little family there who want their children to have their education fully through the medium of Welsh. That's why it was brought here today. And I am feeling very, very sorry for the little family, y plant bach yna sydd yn dymuno cael eu haddysg.
Those children who wish to have their education through the medium of Welsh. So I second what Martin has proposed, and it was also seconded by Hugh Irving, that we leave this for a while. Could I ask Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts too to go and speak to some of the parents who are asking for entirely Welsh medium education at Ysgol Bro Cynmerch? Is that all right with you, Hugh?
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, I'm quite happy to do that. Could I just add one other thing?
I don't know if there's any press on this, but this piece of work isn't just about the Welsh language. It's really important. This is not Denbighshire neglecting the Welsh language. And I don't know if Emrys was correcting me. What I meant, if it was me, what I meant to say that it looks 80% Welsh and 20% English on paper. I know it doesn't happen. And as I said, my son does not have any subjects through the medium of English other than English language. But you know, but just in potential, just to put it into context, is that if a real high school offers a subject at year 10 that Denby High School doesn't offer, we wouldn't give them transport to go there. Are you with me? So this is a problem bigger than beyond just the Welsh language. So I just think we need to keep that into context, because you know, but when it gets to year 10, you have, you know, maybe 15 subjects, but if only one child picks one of those subjects, it's not viable to run that course for that year. So I just want to put that into, and I don't want, I didn't want, if the press were listening, that we were neglecting the Welsh language, because I think you all know that our investment in the Welsh language in education has been really good over the last few years, and Welsh language is growing in Denbighshire, so it's not neglect of that.
We agree confidently with you, and we do understand that there is a transport policy not only to do with the Welsh language and transporting children to Welsh medium schools, but there are other problems. I do understand that, and Emrys wants to come back in here.
The speaker before me was Ellie, and when I said what I said, Ellie's reaction, I could see that she realised exactly where I was coming from, and she accepted that correction as well. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. So we've had a good discussion on this. It is a shame that this has come before us, but we had to have this before you, because this family want their children to have their full Welsh medium education. That is their wish, but we can't answer it at the moment. But if Councillor Hilditch Roberts could look at their situation if possible, I'd be very grateful to you for that. And we look forward, Ian, to seeing what your response will be to the transport policy of Denbighshire entirely. And I would propose here today that we send a letter from this committee to Lee Waters, the person who is rather slow bringing this from the Welsh Government, that we write a letter to him to say that we are concerned that transport to schools is suffering, especially for those who want their provision through the medium of Welsh. That is my proposal, if anybody's willing to second that, please. Thank you. So are we all in agreement with that we put pressure on one of the officials in Cardiff? Right, thank you very much to you, Ian, and to Hugh Hilditch Roberts. You've had a busy morning, hard morning, and we wish you well, and thank you for your patience and the good work that you do for Denbighshire, especially in the field of education. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, good to be back. Thank you. Right, we'll move on now to the agenda, and we turn to one of the best officers we have here in Denbighshire, Rhiann Evans. Please, if you could do the Scrutiny work programme. Could I also thank Neil and Kathleen for their contributions today? Thank you both. Thank you for that. This is the usual work programme. It's on page 255 of the pack that you have. Looking at the work programme, the shadow of COVID is still over everything. There was a report to be presented to you today on Cavendish Healthcare, but we had a request a few weeks ago, because the report that was due to come to you was the annual report of the company for 2019-2020. But because of COVID, they have failed to get it ready in time. And because we are now in the last quarter of the current financial year, they are asking whether they can bring the report for the 2 years to you at the same time in June. The chair allowed this request, so that is now on the work programme for June. The next meeting will be on the 18th of March, and looking at the work programme, there are 5 items, which is more than what you usually have. I've done a bit of inquiries, and there was a report on Havandaig in Rhyl, but of course, because of COVID, Havandaig hasn't been open. So at the moment, they can't bring anything to you with regards to that, because it was an evaluation of the services that were available there and how they were trying to expand the choice of activities there. They're hoping, dependent of course on what happens over the next few months, but they're hoping to bring it to you in July, if that's all right with you. Yes, I'm sure we all agree with that. I've had confirmation that the report on the Commercial Waste Service Evaluation Plan, that will be available by March, and also the one on library service standards. The other two are the corporate plan and the corporate risk register. Those are business as usual, so they will be available to you. In Appendix 2 is the application form for topics that any of you would like to see discussed. If you'd fill that form in, send it to me, and the chairs group will consider it. They met last Thursday. There were no topics put forward last week to come to this committee. Their next meeting will be on the 11th of March, if I remember rightly. So if you have got any issues, fill that form in and submit it, and they'll consider. In Appendix 3, you have the Cabinet Forward Work Plan and the topics that they have to come up in the next meetings. And in Appendix 4, there's the latest about the recommendations of the last meetings. And as I said earlier, the recommendations of that special meeting on the 22nd of December will go to full council on the 26th of February. The only other thing is there was for information documents that was circulated to you on Tuesday, which included an update on the corporate plan for quarter 1 and 2, just as a background to you for the next meeting when you'll be discussing quarter 3. That's it, I think. Thank you, Rian, for those details. So we'll be meeting again on the 18th of March. Could I ask everybody for their patience today? I have got no feedback from committee representatives that I know of. I've been to SIG.
About that one. They discuss good things, so they do a lot of good work in the background.
So there we are. We're coming to the end of the meeting. Could I?
Patience. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd.
Thank you all.
And be careful. It was nice for me to travel to Ruthin for a change. It's very, very, very odd to sit here and not seeing all of you in front, sitting down and having a good old chat beforehand. So diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd.
So thank you all for everything.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Diolch I chi.